that fits into our discussion today as we learn about Jehovah Sabaoth. Ah, you don't know that guy. Let's go to learn about him, okay? All right, we're looking at the life of Samuel, and last week we looked at the state of the nation. I can't say union because they weren't really unified. What was the world, what was the nation of Israel like in the time when Samuel was born? Everybody give it an A, B, C, D minus F. It was not good. How was the leadership? The judges? Weak. Problems. Issues, all of them. People like Samson, even Jephthah, even some of the other ones, the little known ones at the time, were all had issues, problems, and selfishness, and self-gratification, and things like that. What was the state of the nation itself? Were they a unified nation where every tribe loved its brothers and sisters? No. In fact, they had some civil war. Tens of thousands were killed in battles between each other. They almost wiped out the entire nation of Benjamin. The entire tribe almost wiped it off the face of the earth. I mean, it's a problem, isn't it? And how was the morality? Very bad. In fact, the term kept coming up. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Is that ever a good idea? Never a good idea. This is not God's intent, that we do what's right in our eyes. We're supposed to do what's right in whose eyes? In God's eyes. So this was the problem. And this is the nation that Samuel is coming into. Coming in to fulfill a very important role for God. Now, he didn't know that. His mother did not know that. Eli didn't know that yet. But he was coming in, and he was going to be that bridge. That was going to come in as a judge, but also a prophet, to take them from judges to kings and try to bring some kind of order back to the people and bring the people back to God. That was going to be Samuel's job. Easy job? No. Not any easier than the one Moses had. Again, his parents didn't know what he was going to have to do. He didn't know what he was going to have to do. Samuel's going to have to start very young, though. Whereas Moses started his ministry when he was 80 years old with plenty of experience, Samuel's going to have to come right out of the gate. And he's going to have a lot put on his shoulders. And we're going to look at how he dealt with things. So we're going to look tonight at the birth of Samuel. So let's all go to 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1. And let's take a look at his genealogy. Who is he? Who was his family? 1 Samuel chapter 1, and in verse 1, we get a rundown. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim. Everybody got that? We're going to call it, as they do later on, Rama. Can you say that? Rama. And by the way, I looked it up. Ramathaim Zophim, basically that means there was a higher Rama and a lower Rama, which later on they just called Rama. Not Diet Rama. So they're from Rama, which is interesting to me because you remember that whole story with the man and had the woman from Bethlehem and she was killed and he cut her up. Remember that story? He was supposed to go, his choice was to go to Ramah or to Gibeon, and he ended up going to Gibeah, and that's when all the problems happened. So I was wondering, what was going on Ramah? Maybe they were better over there. I don't know. But that's where he was from. He was from Ramah, which is in Mount Ephraim. So we're talking about Ephraim area. So you're talking north of Jerusalem. And his name was Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and Ephrathite. You say, well, that's a lot of... Now, if you go to Chronicles, you can look at actually that rundown of those people. And they're listed as related to Levi. Levi, one of his sons was Kohath, and Kohath then leads down to these people. Samuel's not listed in the list in Chronicles, but each one of these is, as you run down through all of them. And evidently, that started, the kind of one that runs it, of Suf, he was an Ephrathite. Does that sound familiar? Ephrathah? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Ephrathah? Bethlehem, Ephrathah. Yes, that area, anybody from that area of Bethlehem was known as an Ephrathite. So where is he He is a Levite who has a role then in the worship of God. Kohathites, basically, they were the ones that carried stuff. So that was their job. So he had that kind of job. So he was a Levite, and he was in that line. He had a job, and he was also, his relatives were from the area around Bethlehem, which Ruth was too. And Ruth happened also around this time of all of this, all the story with Ruth and everything. They were from Bethlehem. Bethlehem said it's a big role. Because who's eventually going to be born in Bethlehem? Jesus Christ, because he's of the line of David, who was from where? Bethlehem. Everybody's from Bethlehem in this part of the story. But that's his lineage. Now, so he was not of Judah, like David was. He was a Levite who was living and has those roots back to Bethlehem that is now living in Ephraim. Everybody got that straight? Sure. Good. All right. That's who they are. And he had 2 wives. Good idea or bad idea? Bad. 1, great. 2, terrible. Terrible idea. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. So again, you kind of get the moral concept of what's going on in the country. Even the Levites, who were supposed to have the job of keeping the people straight, were they doing what they were supposed to be doing? Were they supposed to have 2 wives? No, not by any stretch. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Isn't that a nice word? We ever have do you have another granddaughter? Name her? No.
Penny.
Penny? Okay. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And it seems to be a constant in the Bible that if you're in the Bible and you're the most beloved of the wives, you got no children. It seemed like that was always the way. They had no children, and it seemed like the ones that were the least liked of the husband, they had tons of kids. What was that create? Conflict. Serious conflict, and that's what happened as well. We'll see in a second. So, verse 3. And this man, Elkanah, went up out of his city, Ramah, yearly to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, he went, as was his duty. So were there still faithful people in Israel? I mean, we gave him an F, but were there still some? He went every year to give his sacrifices unto the Lord and to worship the Lord. So there were faithful. And that's the thing about Israel. Do we know there will always be some faithful? There'll always be a remnant, and Elkanah was one of those. While his home life was not exactly what God wanted, he still had a heart for God. And to worship God, he went to do. In fact, this was instructed of them back in Deuteronomy. Let's all go back to Deuteronomy. Keep something in 1 Samuel. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 12. In this section of Deuteronomy, you have to remember, Deuteronomy was Moses talking to the next generation. That first generation that came out of Egypt, when they got the promised land, they said, no thanks. That looks too hard. Big cities, giant people, looks wonderful. Milk and honey, excellent, but can't do it. So they were punished by God. They had to wander around until that generation died off. And as this next generation is coming in, God gives his instruction again through Moses about what he expects of them. This section of Deuteronomy is, if you want to be blessed in the land, this is what you need to do. Right? He says this, starting verse 1. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall observe to do in the land, which the Lord God of thy father gives thee to possess it all the days that you live upon the earth. You shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which you shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains and upon the hills and under every green tree. And you shall overthrow their altars and break their pillars and burn their groves with fire. And you shall hew down the graven images of their gods and destroy the names of them out of that place. We kind of talked about this morning, right? you're serious about serving God only, you got to get rid of what? All the other idols, right? By the way, did they do that? No. Was it a problem in their side the rest of their existence? Yes. A serious problem. So, you must do that. Verse 4. You shall not do so unto the Lord your God. In other words, you're not going to wipe out his existence, okay? You're not going to get rid of his altar. Does he have an altar? Yes. Did they burn on those altars? Yes. Did they have the tabernacle? They had that. And yes, that we're going to keep, right? That'll be the only place. Verse 5. But unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall you seek, and thither thou shalt come. And there, you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and your heave offerings of your hand, and your vows and your freewill offerings and the firstlings of your herds and your flocks. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all that you put your hand unto, yea, ye and your households, wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. So, when you get into the land, God will choose a place. And what was that place? We heard it in 1 Samuel. Shiloh, which was in Mount Ephraim. And he said, this is the place. You plop down the tabernacle there. That's the place everybody goes to worship God. They come every year and bring their offerings unto God. And they eat. You say, what do they eat? We have to remember most of the sacrifices, I don't know if you've studied this already in Leviticus, but most of the sacrifices, you did not burn it all up. You'd burn off the fat. You'd drain it of its blood and things like that, but then you would eat.
Yeah, we just learned this morning.
All right.
Yeah, the rest was either given to the priests, or in the case of the peace offering, one particular offering, the offerant and his family and others would eat of it together.
Yep. And that's what we're going to see in 1 Samuel. They were keeping the sacrifices. He was going there. He wasn't going up into the hills like some people were. That's too far to go. Why have I got to go to Shiloh? Why have I got to go out of my tribe and go up to Ephraim and go through there and go there? Why can't I just do it here, do it there, do it there? By the way, later on when they moved the temple to Jerusalem, they got the same thing, didn't they? Why we got to go down there? Why can't we just do it here? So
people have never wanted to get up and go.
Nobody wants to get up and go. But this man was doing this, going there and bringing those offerings. Verse 8. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. We're going to have rule and order when we get into the land. When you get in the land, you're not going to do what we're doing now. We're going to have a place set up. You're going to go there. Not everybody's going to do what is right in their own eyes. By the way, is it a problem? I said this earlier. Is there a problem when everybody does what is right in their own eyes? I will sacrifice where I want to, when I want to whomever I want to.
To what end?
That's a problem. God is a God of order, and he knows we need order. If you let people worship what is however they want to in their own eyes, how will they do it? Badly, horribly, idiotically, whatever verb you want to use. I mean, selfishly, whatever adverb you want to use, that's what we're going to do, right? Whatever negative adverb you want to use, that's what we're going to do. So he set up a set. When you get in the land, this is what I'm going to do. And he goes on further. We won't go through verse 14, but go through verse 14. He says again, when you get in the land, I will have a place. It will be there only. You bring it, bring the sacrifices. We will have order, and you will worship me only. Right? Now, what are most people doing? It's called not that. But what is Elkanah doing? He is doing that. So let's give some kudos where kudos is due. Samuel comes from good stock, doesn't he? Again, not exactly following all the rules, 2 wives, that's a problem, but other than that, he is doing religiously what he's supposed to do. So let's go back to 1 Samuel. And I want to note something there. Verse 3, and this man went up out of the city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts. This is Jehovah Sabaoth, and it means Lord of hosts. So this is a particular name. This particular name of God is used 270 times in the Bible. Anyone want to guess the first time it's used?
Right here.
Right here. This is the first time this one's particularly is used. And in this story, because he is the Lord of hosts. Now, there's a few ways to think about Lord of hosts. He is the Lord of the heavenly hosts. Is he the Lord of heaven? The Lord of all the angels and all the heavenly hosts. That is one way he is the Lord of hosts. He is the Lord of the host of creation. All the stars and moon and all those kind of planets and galaxies, he is the Lord of hosts. Is he Lord of that as well? Lord of all creation. He's the Lord of heaven, Lord of all creation, and also means Lord of hosts, meaning lords of armies. He is the King of kings and Lord of lords. He is Lord over this time. And it is important to this story because it shows, as we go through this time of Judges, when who is really running Israel. Everybody's doing what is right in their own eyes. This is a problem. They're not really anything. And what's going to be their solution during the life of Samuel? Let's get a king. Wait a minute. Who's the Lord of hosts? Who's the Lord of all the kings of earth? Who's the Lord of all creation? Who's the Lord over the heavenly hosts? Who should be our king? Who should be the one we're listening to? Not ourselves, not some king, not some government, not man, but God. And it's interesting that right here at the beginning of this story, we have him being called what he is. He is the Lord of hosts. And this is also the name that Hannah gives him. And again, it's not some military leader who calls upon the Lord of hosts to give him some great victory. Not some government official who says, the Lord of hosts, give me ability to run all this stuff. Who is it? It is a lowly, childless woman from Mount Ephraim who's sitting there and is having a really bad time. But she calls on who? The Lord of hosts. She knows who he is. So Samuel got good roots here. As a father who's faithful, even in a nation who's not faithful. And as a mother who what? Knows who God is. Let's keep going. Because there's one more thing we need to look at in verse 3. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Oh good, they've got priests. Everything must be okay. Everything must be running in good order then. No. Go to chapter 2. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 12. We're going to see what kind of priests they were. We've already seen the judges were faulty. The people were not doing very well. The nation, the various tribes were battling against each other. How was God's house going? Not good. Verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were the sons of Belial. That's a bad start. Sons of Belial means sons of the devil, sons of mischief, sons horrible. They knew not the Lord. They weren't just mischievous. They were what? They didn't even know God. Is it a bad thing when the person is supposed to be your religious leader doesn't know your God? It's a problem. Verse 13, and the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, so people were coming to Shiloh to bring their sacrifices, right? The priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook in 3 teeth in his hand. And he struck it into the pan or the kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Now again, it's supposed to be a sacrifice, and the priests were supposed to get this, and everybody else was supposed to get that. And they were like, tell you what, we're going to let God decide. I'm just going to thrust this hook in there, and anything comes out, God gives to us. Kind of like that old joke. You remember the old joke about the pastor? how you decide how much money of the offering that day you get? And one guy said, well, what I do is I make a circle around me, and I throw it up in the air, and anything that lands outside the circle is mine. Everything inside the circle is God's. That guy says, well, I got a better way of doing that. I make a circle, and I throw up in the air, and anything that lands in the circle is mine, and everything outside is God's. And the guy says, I got a better system than that. I throw it up in the air, and anything that stays up is his, and anything that comes down is mine. That's the kind of priest we had here. It was like, mine. They were getting fat and happy, weren't they? They were taking what they wanted of God's sacrifice. And again, a lot of these were poor people. The sacrifice was a big deal. And coming and paying for that and putting it in there, expecting them to have a feast of praise and thanksgiving to God. And who's taking all the food?
They're also
Priests.
taking God's portion.
Yeah, taking God's portion too. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Not only that, verse 15, also before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. He was taking the raw, even before they sacrificed it, he was taking the raw meat, so they, which I prefer too, because I make it myself, but he's taking the raw meat. Is that what God intended? They were doing what was right in their own eyes, own minds. It's like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we think. Verse 16. And if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, nay, but thou shalt give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord. The men abhorred the offering of the Lord. So because of that, people were not coming. Frankly, that was happening to me, and I'm going, I know they're not doing it right, and it's like, I'm not going to let you do this to the sacrifice unto God, and they would beat me up if I didn't do it. Who would go back? And people were not going. Elkanah was going. Even with that, I'm sure that was happening to him. Because he was doing it in Shiloh, they were doing it to everybody. And even though they were doing that to him, was he keep coming back every year? Well, let's give a hand out there. He's staying faithful in spite of Hophni and Phinehas. So when it says there, Hophni and Phinehas were there, that's what they mean. It was not a nice time to go to the temple. It was a time of stress. It was a time of threats and things like that. And they weren't doing it right, but he still went. So, good stock he's coming from. Verse 4. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to her sons and her daughters portions. So of the sacrifice, of course, they would get theirs back, and it would be all ready, and they would have their feast, and he'd give a portion to Peninnah, a portion to all of her kids, and everything like he's supposed to. But, verse 5, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion. Or another word to say that is a double portion. Because she had no kids. And he loved her. And he didn't want to make her feel bad. So gave her a double portion. So Elkanah's one of the unsung heroes of the Bible. I mean, this guy's trying. He's doing everything he can. For he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary, I like that. Peninnah goes from being Peninnah, the wife of Elkanah, to the adversary. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. So sat there and made fun of her. Again, this is a very similar to times we've seen before in the Bible. And if you're not the loved one, you might as well be the fertile one. Right? You got something to hold over the other one. And to provoke her to anger and frustration and depression. That's what she wanted to do. Verse 7. And as she did so, year after year. This is going on for some time. Again, Elkanah's still going. Hannah's still going. But this is going on year after year, and still she's praying every year, no child, no child. And Anna probably keeps having kids. So, and keeps coming, keeps going on. Hophni and Phinehas are still doing their thing year after year, but they come. When she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. So it got to the point where I just can't even eat. I can't be happy here. I can't praise here. I can't worship here. Leave me alone. Now, here comes our hero again, Elkanah. I like him. Verse 8, then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? First of all, just the fact that the husband realized she was weeping. That there's something wrong. Yes, good job. In touch with your feelings. Excellent. And why eatest thou not? Also notice she wasn't eating, right? There's something wrong. And why is thy heart grieved? He felt so sorry for her. Why? And he knows why. But he also says, am not I better to thee than 10 sons? In other words, count your blessings, right? You're married, you have a husband that loves you, and another wife. But anyway, that's where the problem comes in. But I mean, still, she had good things, right? But still had no child. So this still, and the fact the other wife had children still weighed on her. So what did she do? Verse 9. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. So he was there at that time. And he notices her come in to pray. Verse 10. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And she vowed a vow. Does that sound like anybody? Does that sound familiar to somebody around her time period? Jephthah. Evidently it was the thing you do. If you want something from God, what was evidently the going idea? Let's make a deal, right? I vow to you to do this if you answer my prayer. Is that what God wants from us? No. It's not what, but again, it kind of shows the hearts of the people then, right? This is what you do. I really want it, so I'm going to vow a vow. He says what? O Lord of what? Hosts. She says it. She calls him that name. Again, it's the first time recorded in the Bible that anybody calls him that. You are the Lord of hosts. If thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. Who does that sound like? Samson. So the two judges around that time, one made a vow and the other one didn't cut his hair. Somebody else did. But so let's make a vow, let's do the Nazarite, let's do the thing, right? How many here knew that he was a Nazarite?
Well,
yeah.
I question there as whether he is, because it doesn't talk about the other.
But that was the outward sign. That was the outward sign. You always didn't cut the hair if you were in a Nazarite vow. In fact, when you were done with the vow, you shaved your head. So, and went to the temple and made sacrifices. So, it was kind of the purpose there. So, she's kind of pulling from her time period, isn't she? From the leadership of the time, saying, "I will make this vow." Because she's at her wit's end, right? How many think she's prayed for this before? Right? She's prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and God had been evidently saying it's not time yet. Does God always have this plan? Yeah. Now, Eli's sitting there watching her, verse 12. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Because she's praying silently, but her mouth is kind of... And given the times, what did Eli assume? Are you drunk, woman? Verse 13, now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought that she had been drunken. By the way, how sad is that? The priest's assumption is that somebody who's distressed and praying to the Lord must be drunk. Signs of the time, right? You get kind of a reflection here of what life was like. And to think that a woman would be drunk, I mean, in the house of the Lord, that's horrible. But that was his assumption. Of course, given what his sons do, you probably thought everybody would run, right? Verse 13, now Hannah, she spake in her heart, verse 14, I'm sorry. And Eli said unto her, how long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. All right? So, abstinence. Get rid of it. So he's taking that. Get right with the Lord to stop the drinking, lady. And what does Hannah say? Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, like your sons. She could have said, but did not. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. Sorry about that. But I see you're sorrowful. May God bless you. May the God of Israel give you your request. And she said, let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. What does that show about Hannah?
Confidence in God.
Confidence in the word of God coming from the priest. Faith that the high priest spoke as a spokesman of God, and this was going to happen. Now she had hope, right? That's tremendous. I love his mom and dad. Great people. Verse 19, and they rose up in the morning early and worshiped before the Lord. Love that too. Get up early before we leave. Let's do one last worship of the Lord here in Shiloh before we hit the road to Ramah. And returned and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her, just as she asked. And she had a little bouncing baby Samuel. Now, what was the deal though? You give me a son, I will give him to the Lord. Now, not like it was customary, the one who opens the womb, the male to open the womb was dedicated to the Lord. This was, he's going to work for the Lord. He's going to be in the temple his whole life. I'm giving him to the Lord. Is she really going to do that? Let's find out. Verse 20. Wherefore it came to pass when the time was come about after Hannah conceived that she bare a son and called his name Samuel, because I have asked him of the Lord. And basically Samuel means asked of God or requested of God. That's what Samuel means. Whenever you see L, that means God. So Samuel asked of God. Okay. Verse 21. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. So again, that great. We now have another one. Let's all go to the house of the Lord. Are Hophni and Phinehas still doing their nonsense? Yes. But this year, let's go and praise the Lord together. But Hannah said no. Verse 22. But Hannah went not up. For she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. So she wasn't delaying, but she knew, it's like, when I go, the next time I go to Shiloh, he's staying there. If he's not weaned yet, I'd have to stay too. So I can't wait. But as soon as he is weaned, as soon as he's old enough to not need me like that anymore, then he's staying and I'm going home. That's called what? Faith. Dedication, right? To the Lord. That this is a gift of God that I will give back to the Lord. And what did Elkanah do? Verse 23. Elkanah, her husband, said unto her, do what seemeth thee good. Tarry until thou hast weaned him. Only the Lord establish his word. So the woman abode and gave her son suck until she weaned him. Elkanah doesn't protest. So you made that vow? Good. That's fine. 100% behind you. You go ahead and wait. Maybe next year after, we'll take them up and we will leave them. And that's what they did. Verse 24. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. Yeah, just weaned is young, right? And they slew a bullock and brought the child to Eli. She said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here praying unto the Lord, that you thought was drunk. You shouldn't bring that up. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition which I have asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. And now he's going to live where? The temple. He will be under the Lord and serve the Lord. And now Eli has a son he can actually be proud of. Which we'll get to later. But there's one part I want you to look at real quick, and that is Hannah's prayer. Chapter 2. Because I find this little prayer that she prays rather interesting, especially when you compare it to the prayer of Mary. Mary also, remember she had her Magnificat, where she talks about, God has done this. And there are a lot of similarities. So let's take a look at what Hannah says here in chapter 2. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoices in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. Now Mary says, My soul rejoices in the Lord. But soul or heart, so it's like you start with what? Rejoicing. Rejoicing unto the Lord, because he is our what? Salvation. Right? Verse 2. There is none holy as the Lord, for there is none beside thee. Neither is there any rock like our God. It is praise unto God because of who he is. Now, I've harped on this a few times, but the Bible tends to. It's great to thank God for all he has done and praise him for all he's done, but it's more important to praise him because of who he is. And Mary does the same thing. Praises him for he is God, right? Then basically says, hush. Verse 3. Talk no more so exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. Always wonder if she's thinking about Penina there. Those who provoke, those who challenge God, those who think God cannot do it or does not know. He knows everything, doesn't he? So everybody just hush. God's got it under control. In fact, verse 4, the bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumbled are girded with strength. And this is also Mary does. She talks about how those who are proud, those who are lifted up will be what? Broken down. And those who are lowly, like Mary and like Hannah, they will be what? Lifted up. Verse 5, they that were full have hired out themselves for bread. Those who had plenty, they got to go and work for a few crumbs just to feed themselves. And they that were hungry ceased being hungry, so that the barren hath borne 7, and she that hath many children is waxed feeble. Again, maybe think about Penina again. Those who are proud in their actions and what they can do, they will be laid low, but those who put their trust in the Lord shall be lifted up. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and bringeth up. So who's in charge here again? God is in charge. He is the Lord of hosts, right? He is the Lord of lords. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low, and he's the one that lifts up. He is the Lord of hosts. He raises up the poor out of the dust and lifts up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. Now, this gets kind of interesting because this is rather prophetic. During Samuel's life, who will be king?
Saul David.
Yeah, first of all, Saul. Saul from the greatest of the tribes? No, lowly Benjamin, whose great-great-grandfather would have been one of those 600 left who had to go kidnap some women just to keep the line alive, right? From the lowly, was he somebody who was great and he was tall? That was about it. But he decides who, right? What about David?
Youngest son.
From a lowly little town where? Bethlehem, a little sheep town outside Jerusalem. Born to a family of no significance, the smallest and the youngest of the 7 sons, he's set to be a prince, right? Even Solomon. Was he the firstborn son of David? Second? Third? Fourth? No. No, he was that young one that was just born with him and Bathsheba, right? I mean, he will decide. He sets up. And that's the thing. Even here, as Samuel's being born, God is reminding them all, I decide who runs this place. Even if it is a king, I am their king. I will decide. And we're going to see that in Samuel's life, not so much, but after Samuel leaves, so many times people of Israel try to say, okay, we'll decide who the next king is. Does that ever work out well? No. No, it does not. Verse 9, he will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength shall no man prevail. By man's strength, nobody will prevail. But with God's strength, anybody can prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. The Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. Now, we're really driving forward here, because this is a direct prophecy of Jesus Christ, the anointed one. The one who will reign for how long again? Forever and ever and ever, right? And Elkanah went to Ramah to his house, and the child did minister unto the Lord before the Eli the priest. So they went home, and who stayed there? Samuel stayed there. The one asked of God came. So that's his start. Got a good start? He's going to grow up, and very soon he's going to have a calling. What does God want of Samuel? He's got big plans, doesn't he? And it's going to be a question, will he do it? Is he going to be young? Yes. From a lowly family? Yes. No pedigree? Correct. But what has he got that nobody else has got? Chosen of God. And we're going to see what God can do with little Samuel. But keep in mind, had good roots. So I like Hannah and Elkanah. Both of them are very faithful and very trusting. And their hope clearly was in God. So somehow that passed down too. So, any questions about Samuel and his family? All right. So now he's living in Shiloh. We'll see what happens next week. All right? Let's pray. Heavenly Father,